Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you sit right now, and thank you for joining us. This is a webinar for journalists and students from the Resilience Media Project at the Earth Institute of Columbia University. I'm Dale Willman. The goal of the Resilience Media Project is to help journalists in their coverage of systemic changes, such as pandemics and climate risk. Right now, we do that by giving journalists tools to better cover issues surrounding these topics and to show them how to better envision stories that look towards solutions. As for my background, I've spent many years as a journalist at such places as CBS, CNN, and for a large part of my life, NPR. I'm also a photographer and a drone pilot. And my primary work now is training journalists about ecological resilience, climate change, and much more. Information comes at us today at a pace unimaginable just 10 years ago. The fire hose of data long ago turned into a major pipeline with no off switch. This has led to an infodemic, a time with too much information, both on and offline. And because people are confronted with too much information, getting attention for your story is sometimes a heavy lift. That's because, at least in part, this overwhelming amount of information has changed the way people access knowledge, including science. They search, but they only look at the first page of results. They may want to understand complex issues, but research shows that people read well less than 30% of the text on the pages they access. So how can we cut through the infodemic clutter and get our stories seen and read? There's an easy answer that all journalists know. It's to tell a story. Evolution has hardwired our brains for storytelling. Long ago, stories were the main source of information about survival. Sitting around the campfire, we learned where to find water and where there'd be dragons. While we worry less today about being eaten by tigers, we still convey important information through storytelling. And a great tool for this is photos. A good photograph is more than just an image. It can tell a story. It has a subject, it has action, it sometimes has tension. And in this age of the infodemic, photos have taken on an increased role in how people absorb information. Why is that? Well, it's because, at least in part, with the way our brains take in information, it takes some time to read about a concept. But our brains process images at an amazing rate. The human brain is able to recognize a familiar object within 100 milliseconds. And that's why most social media are visual focused mediums. Researchers say a post that has an image with it is 10 times more likely to lead to engagement. So photos are important, whether you're posting about your kid's birthday party or research into Utah's worst drought in 400 years. They can be like a gateway drug, the hook that brings people into your story, or they can be your story. Good storytelling offers an emotional hook. When you get people to have an emotional attachment to your story, they're more likely to read to the end, and photos can do that for you. But getting photos can sometimes be difficult, particularly for freelancers. Terrain may be difficult, or the location where photos are needed may be far away, but there are organizations that can help. Today, I have two guests. Isabel Nyroth is the head of drones at Globy. She's been flying drones since 2014 for the purpose of training, researching, and utilizing drone data in various industries. During her career, she's traveled the world helping companies and users expand their drone services. Now at Globy, she coordinates the collection of global drone data from a centralized platform called crowd droning. With more than 5,000 pilots in more than 90 countries, she says the sky is the limit in collecting drone data for good. Also with us is Jane Pargeter of EcoFlight. Jane's been with EcoFlight since 2004. She's currently its executive director. Jane grew up in South Africa, where the spectacular wildlands, abundant wildlife, engendered her with a passionate love of the land. She's brought her love of the wild and spoiled areas of Africa to the Western US, where she now lives. Jane has nearly 20 years of experience in the aviation conservation arena, working with grassroots, regional, and national groups to rally communities to lead the fight from the air against the destruction of valuable habitats and wildlands. There are several organizations similar to EcoFlight and SEJ members, many of who have joined us, have had the good fortune of having them with us at conferences in the past, but EcoFlight may be the oldest and help set the standard for this type of work. So Jane, I'm going to come to you first, but before I do that, let me say that this is an unusual webinar for the journalists involved. We're going to have brief discussions with Jane and Isabel, but then we're going to ask you for your questions and your thoughts about how you think these services might best suit your needs and questions you have for them about the work that they do. So Jane, briefly tell us about EcoFlight, if you would.
EcoFlight was founded by Bruce Gordon who has 40 years of conservation aviation experience. And he and another guy, Michael Stewart, used small airplanes originally for the spotted owl up in the Pacific Northwest, because when you drive around on the highways in the Pacific Northwest, you just see trees. But if you get up in the air, you'll see that there's this short band of trees along the highways, and the rest of it is clear cut. And so that's how they first used the airplane and started conservation aviation, which was actually about 40 years ago. And then that evolved into EcoFlight. We are a nonprofit, and we use Cessna 210, which is a 6-seater airplane with high wings and no struts. So it gives you a great visual of the ground. And our aim is to put diverse stakeholders into the airplane. So we have people from both sides of the aisle in a very small space, and it really creates a space and a platform for conversations about conservation to happen.
So tell me what role journalists play in that equation.
We aim to have journalists on at least 50% of our overflights, because we can only fit 5 passengers in the plane at a time. And if one of those is a journalist, depending on their reach, whether it's local, regional, or international or national, they can reach thousands to millions of people with their published articles, or whether it's TV or webinars.
And do you have specific topics that you are focused on and you ask journalists to come along, or can journalists propose an issue to you?
It works both ways. We often have journalists call us up, whether it's the LA Times, National Geographic, or smaller papers, saying, look, I really need to get up over the Grand Staircase Escalante and see for myself what's going on, and get an objective platform over the landscape. And we also, if we have a flight with somebody, a conservation group that's requested a flight over a particular landscape or issue, we'll ask them, do you have press, and can you get press? And occasionally it's at the beginning of a campaign where they don't want press because they're not ready for it to go to the general public. But most of the time, we can reach out and get a member of the press on the plane.
So, and what I'm hearing is you encourage journalists to be a part of this and
Yes.
to find ways to use your service.
Yes, absolutely. It's very, very important for us to get that greater outreach and greater education of the general public to have journalists on the plane.
Does it matter whether it's a small outlet or a big outlet or a freelancer?
Not at all. We're all are welcome, and we fly from the tiniest little organizations to big international ones like The Guardian, Al Jazeera, BBC, etc.
If a journalist comes to you with a really interesting story, do you then try and find a way to get other stakeholders involved, and perhaps, or could a journalist come to you and say, I've got these 3 groups engaged with this, can we all come up for a flight?
Yes, so both of those. So if you were a journalist and you said you've already got the groups, then we'd be very happy to provide the platform for you. If a journalist comes and wants to fly on his own, we typically say that doesn't really fulfill our mission of getting diverse stakeholders in the plane. So do you object if, let's say, we recently had a flight with High Country News over uranium on the edge of Bears Ears, and we were going to fly the photographer by himself, is what he had requested, but we reached out and said, we would like to have the tribe involved, the Ute Mountain Utes, and we'd like to have some other experts involved. And that way he gets more education on the airplane and we're fulfilling our mission. And the flight actually led to the Ute Mountain Utes contacting the EPA right afterwards to show that they were in violation of regulations with the White Mesa uranium mine. So it was a win-win for everybody. High Country News got a great article out of it, and the EPA was notified and have contacted the state of Utah, and they're being fined and required to adhere to regulations going forward.
An odd technical question real quick. I assume you're all in headsets talking?
I'm not on a headset. Oh, you mean in the airplane?
I'm sorry, in the airplane. Yeah, in the planes.
Yes, we're all on headsets. So
can that be recorded?
that can be recorded. And how we do that, we have a little adapter that can be used for things like NPR, but we found the best sound is actually through having a GoPro hooked in through one of the lead headsets. And we put it on the dashboard and film backwards so you can see the passengers talking and pointing out the window, and we're recording it at the same time. And then we put GoPros underneath the plane as well to record the landscape. We usually put a 360 on the tail and something like a 10 on the wing. And that way we capture the landscape at the same time the conversation is happening.
I could just see a journalist setting up a flight where they have several of their sources and they could conduct part of the interview on the flight as you're seeing what it is that you're discussing. I think that would be really powerful for a story to have something like that.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay. So thank you for that. I want to move over to drones a bit now, and let's bring in Isabel and talk about her project. So we've got sort of the legacy process of being up in the plane, but we have this new process of drones. So Isabel Naira from Globi, welcome. Glad to have you here. Can you tell us a little bit about what your organization is all about?
Absolutely. Hi. Globi is a Swedish startup. We have created a platform called crowd droning. And the platform of crowd droning is essentially a network, a global network of thousands of pilots that all pilot drones. So within crowd droning, we're able to scale and collect drone data wherever it's needed through simply making drone data more accessible. Through crowd droning, we're trying to bring Earth observations by drones in a way that is using drones for good. So when you hear the word drone, you might think of something that is used either in travel or as a kind of toy, something that, you think of it as a kind of cool accessory. But we're trying to prove that drones are so much more than that. And whether that's by taking one single photo that tells a story or a series of perhaps 100 photos or 1,000 photos that can be stitched together to create a 3D model or an orthomosaic photo, these photos tell stories that we are trying to make sure our data that are collected in order to make sure that important decisions can be taken by businesses, organizations that are looking to monitor global health in order to be able to be tracking everything important that we see around us, such as infrastructure and the health of our waters. So I'd like to show you a video actually, which explains a little bit more about crowd droning and how we got to create this platform of global drone pilots. So I'll share my screen really quick.
And once you're done with this, we'll talk about the how journalists can engage with this too.
Yes.
Great.
One second.
While you're bringing that up, let me also say that for journalists, you can start using the chat function now if you have particular questions, or you can wait until Isabel's done speaking here for just a little bit more, and we can just have a roundtable discussion with all of you out there. But I've got a lot of questions about the journalist's role in here too, and how we can access that, and whether or not you have a historic database right now that they'd have access to. So let's watch the video.
Right.
Thousands of drones are flying around in our skies every day. Never before have we had access to so much data. At Globi, we thought, what if we could tap into all these drones and use the data these drones capture to help prevent and respond to disasters? So we did. We recently launched Crowdrunning by Globi, a first of its kind digital platform making drone data available in a whole new way and at a whole new scale by matching drone pilots globally to clients in need of data that matters. Today, over 3,700 drone pilots in over 70 countries are connected to Crowdrunning by Globi, ready to collect drone data on demand.
Hi, I'm Jimmy, and I'm the Globi drone pilot.
At Globi, we are firm believers that the future of possible is already here and passionate about using innovative technology and collaborations to show it. Globi has been recognized time and time again by world-leading publications such as Forbes and BBC as an innovator and a company ahead of their time. Crowdrunning by Globi enables our clients, ranging from humanitarian organizations to notable corporations, to order drone data at global scale in just a few clicks. What was previously a complex process for our clients is now reduced to the simplicity of ordering an Uber. As an added value, Crowdrunning by Globi also helps reduce carbon dioxide, since all our drones are battery driven, as well as we help fueling the global gig economy by providing paid freelance gigs to drone pilots around the world. Growing up, I lived in 5 different countries. When I lived in Zambia, I saw freelance drone pilots working on photography projects for National Geographic. I realized that this photography can be used in data as well, not just as beautiful pictures. So I started to connect drone pilots who wanted to be part of providing social impact around the world. Today, that has grown into a global movement, and I'm proud to say Globi has started to change how the world looks at drones. The impact potential and the economic potential of drones are quite limitless, or as we like to say, the sky is not the limit. We hope you want to join us on the journey of creating a better future with drones.
I hope everyone could hear that okay. Right, so as I was saying, we're on a mission to collect drone data, but we want to do so on a global scale, but yet locally. So using local resources instead of having teams flying all over the world. The kind of data that we're so far gathering, it's either to try and sorry, the kind of data that we're currently gathering, it's everything from monitoring mosquito breeding sites in Malawi in order to help, sorry, I'm losing my words, in order to predict and prevent the spread of malaria. But we're also looking at infrastructure data to be able to make sure that the rollout of our communication methods is done so safely and also maintained. Because if you look at climate change today, the changing climate that we have, it produces a risk to the infrastructure that has been put in place the last few decades, that's currently being put in place. We need to make sure that this is done in a way that will remain safe and ensure that the world stays connected as safely and well as possible. So when it comes to drone data and journalism, I think drone data is an excellent tool for journalists in order to be able to support and back up stories, especially when it comes to having data. It's sometimes just about having one photo that can tell a lot, but sometimes it's about having a series of photos and showing the changes over time and showing how impactful and important it is to have reoccurring data being collected to tell a story which eventually comes together. So
that's in the climate sphere, the climate change sphere. That's right. Something that a project you're beginning this year, right? And looking at data over time. And when you say data, we're talking about video and stills, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, actually this year we launched a project. We are mapping climate change. So we have sent out all of our pilots on missions where they live. in order to detect something that's a local challenge, such as water shortage or even coastal erosion. You see traces of species that are migrating or changing because it's either getting hotter, getting colder, or not enough resources where there once was before. So all of our crowd droning pilots are out and highlighting these local changes that you might not actually read about in the news as frequently as you do about rising sea levels in, the top 10 places that are always highlighted because these are tourist attractions that will be affected. But we want to highlight that it's not just Venice that's going underwater, but the whole world is at risk to even slight changes that make a huge impact in the whole picture. So yeah, we're currently out collecting drone data. Our pilots are out and flying, mapping their local neighborhoods or areas that they live within drivable distance. And together we'll put together a report of this after we've collected data for a few weeks' time. To be able to showcase where are the local issues and how can we help to grab the attention of the decision makers that need to pay attention. What can we adjust already now to perhaps slow down certain problems or help prevent the issues from happening in the first place?
Okay, if I can ask you to unshare your screen so we can go back to
Yes.
full screen. And so you have a database of drone video and images right now, correct?
We do have a database of drone images and videos. Typically,
go ahead, sorry.
Typically drone data is collected on demand. So if you have a specific area that you're interested in, then you come to Globee and you say, hi, this is what I want. I need it in video format, I need it in photo format, or I'm looking to even capture LiDAR data or something that will be used to process and turn into some kind of a report. So yeah, I mean, we try to provide data, something that's already been captured, or we go and capture it.
Well, and that's my question. Do you have an accessible database that people can come and maybe not see the video, but at least see where you have a video available from? So if I'm looking for the Adirondacks where I live, can I come to you and say, what video do you have currently of the Adirondacks? So I just may need cover footage, something, cover art to support the story, not anything particular that might be to value. Rather than having you run out and gather something now, you might have something available. So is that something that's available for journalists right now?
Yes, journalists can write us and ask if there's something specific that you're looking for. And yeah, we can either provide it or we can collect it.
But you don't have an accessible database right now where people come and look and say, okay, this is what I'm looking for. That's not available at this point. Okay, and we should point out you're a relatively new organization, so I'm asking for for resources that may not quite be in place yet. So okay, so but journalists can reach out to you and say, I'm looking for video of this area where they're going to be constructing a pipeline or whatever, and then you will see if you have someone in that area, and if so, that they can gather that.
Yes, exactly. That's the idea behind connecting local pilots to local missions. So yeah, as long as we have a pilot who has the right drone, has the right availability, we can always organize to collect whatever is needed.
But with that caveat, okay. Now you have an economic model. You have clients. You have big clients that come in and pay you to get video for you. What about journalists? Is there a cost for this for journalists to access video?
Yeah, I mean, the current economics model is a client is anybody who's looking for data. So it's actually based per megabyte typically. And yeah, so it really depends. How much data are you looking for? There's also times where you might want to collaborate. If it's for the purpose of a research project, then We'll look at what kind of data is needed and in which kind of volumes. If it's something that we already have, then the price might be a little bit different than sending out a whole new team to go and collect it.
Can you give us an idea of a range? And is there any discount for journalists? Is there any way, as you know, a lot of journalists are freelancers and they don't have a budget for this sort of thing. Is there any way or any consideration to make this either free or at a very reduced rate for journalists?
Yeah, I think this would be an amazing conversation to have, actually, because to understand the need of what kind of imagery journalists would be interested to have, that would definitely help us try to build that, because currently I would say that it doesn't quite exist.
It'd be interesting to poll your pilots. For instance, if you were asking me to get video with my drone of something in this area for a journalist story, I would do it for unless of course it's like CBS or somebody with big pockets. I would do it. I would do that as a courtesy. But then I'm a journalist too, so I'm just curious if there is consideration of polling your pilots to see which ones might be willing to do that.
Yeah, I mean,
to put you on the spot right now.
Thank you for that, Dale. No, but a lot of our pilots, they've also signed up in the name of volunteering. We do have a lot of projects where we encourage pilots to go out, and they're not all paid missions. Not all missions are client-based. Not all missions are, for the purpose of this has a deadline, it needs to be done within a month or so. Sometimes, we just encourage pilots to sign up as a volunteer, and through that, then, yeah, that is technically free data that is open data that would be available for anyone to access.
Oh, I guess okay. So when you've got a client requesting video or stills, then that's not open. It's proprietary. So you're not collecting a database of stuff that everybody can use.
Exactly. So what we want to achieve is a database of drone imagery that would be open access, but we do have to differentiate between some client requests that it will be proprietary, because some infrastructure you can't have as open data, for example.
So give me an example.
Examples of telecom inspections, any kind of utility.
Okay. So
yeah.
If it's proprietary in that sense. Got it.
Right.
Okay.
If it's proprietary in that sense, we can't have that as open data that,
Sure.
Is accessible for everyone. But data, for example, mapping coastal erosion, mapping malaria mosquitoes. This is data that, I think should be accessible for research purposes, or even for telling a story. So if we know that there's a demand for it, then we'll know that, okay, this is the kind of data that would make sense to have as an open source for people to be able to access.
And we're going to do a program in a few weeks aimed at scientists specifically, and how scientists might access and use this. So that I would assume that data would be available for access to journalists too. Okay, so people are starting to ask questions. Let's get to a couple of them, and questions either for Jane or for Isabel, whatever thoughts you have. Thomas raised a really good question, which is that of drone laws, and in some places they're super restrictive. In the U.S., people consider some of the laws pretty restrictive as well. And if you have a drone 250 grams or higher, you have to get a license. There are all sorts of things required now, but in other countries, it can be much tougher. So are you helping the pilots work through that, or are they basically on their own in figuring out those laws and the accessibility to be able to work for you?
Yeah, no, regulation is a huge part of what we do, of course. You can't fly everywhere with drones yet. So it's very important to work either with authorities in each country where they might not have a developed regulatory workflow yet. The United States, it's rather easy because you can get certified so that you do have permission, or you at least understand where to go and what to do. But some countries, there is no regulation, which sometimes also mean that it's just flat out not allowed to fly drones. But for each country that we operate in, we make sure to understand the laws and also work with pilots if most of our pilots know exactly the regulations in each country, or even work very closely with local aviation authorities. So we always make sure that, you know, any mission that we do get, it has to be in authorized airspace that we're allowed to operate in.
Okay,
But
so
yes, we work with the pilot to figure that out.
good. Okay. If as a journalist, I were to provide drone footage for another journalist via Globi, who gets the credit on the final product? Photos, videos provided by Globi, or would there be room for the pilot journalist to get credit and thus provide the service at a more accessible rate? And that's a good question. So the idea of credit when images are used.
I mean, I'm gonna read through that one again. That was quick.
Oh, sorry. Yep.
Provide drone footage for another journalist.
Well, if a journalist is taking video and making it available to Globi, and then another journalist used that, who gets credited for that?
Yeah, and I'm happy to unmute and clarify if that
Sure,
is
please.
unclear.
Yeah, sure. So, okay, as a journalist, providing drone footage for another journalist via Globi, well, our pilots are typically always credited. It depends where is the data going? Is it being published somewhere online? Yes, you get the credit. The person who captured the data gets the credit. If it's something that's proprietary going to a client, then most of the time the pilot is not in the loop of who the client even is. So we're just the middleman. Who's
right, but we're talking specifically about journalist use now, so
right.
So the journalist would get the credit for that.
Yeah,
Okay.
my question kind of keyed off the question that you had about whether journalists might get a better rate, for example, because they have limited funds to buy footage. And you know, again, as a journalist who does have a drone license, I'd be more amenable to that. But you know, maybe I need footage from, you know, northern Maine, and I have no idea who's up there. But Globi might be the organization to sort of act as the middleman, and obviously get a cut from that as well for providing that service. That was kind of where my question was heading. But I understand the answer. Thank you.
Okay. And a question for Jane, and I apologize. I meant to ask this when we were talking initially, but the question of international flights. The question for you, of course, is where you fly, and you responded in the comments. But if you tell everybody what your service area is.
Yes, we fly predominantly in the Western United States. So Rocky Mountains to the West Coast. We fly a little in Canada, within range, of course. The plane flies about 4.5 hours before you need to refuel. And so to make it, you know, we're using our environmental bandwidth. We're using oil and gas to fly the airplane, and economic bandwidth as we're a nonprofit. So we try and fly not much further than a 5-hour range to get to the overflights. And then we build a set of overflights to make it worthwhile with all our partners in that area. And we also fly in Central America. And I did want to note that we, as a nonprofit, our website does hold a database of our images. And I think we have the largest collection of aerial images of the Western United States. We also have a lot of GoPro footage, which you can request. And that doesn't all show up on the website. It's just too big to host there. But journalists are welcome to use that as long as they credit EcoFlight. We provide those images for free. What we do run into with some of the bigger organizations, whether it's a TV station or a Nat Geo, for example, they like to pay a certain amount to be sure that they have objectivity with that. So
Exclusivity.
Exclusivity.
Yep.
Well, not necessarily. It's still, we still retain ownership over it, but they might get to use it ahead of somebody else. We've done that for Front Page, Washington Post, etc. And we don't charge a lot for that, obviously, being a nonprofit, but it's something that the newspapers sometimes require.
And your funding comes from where? From grants and?
Exactly. We're primarily foundation based, but we obviously have individuals and members as well. And we never charge for our flights, but we obviously encourage donations if people can afford to pay for the gas or contribute towards it. We're always appreciative of it.
And your database, extensive number of years. Do you have flights that you've hit certain areas over a period of time? Because sometimes that
Yes.
progression is important.
We have historic, and sometimes you have to request that. It might not have been of an era if it's 20 years old where it was tagged and so automatically shows up. But yes, we can show places, for example, the Roan Plateau in Colorado before it was drilled and after it was drilled, or when a pipeline's been put in and an aspen forest has been decimated. You can show the before and afters of that. So we have quite a number of those cases with historic data.
So I think what I hear you saying is that if you go to the database and you don't see it, still ask, because there might
Absolutely.
be. Okay, that's good to know. Someone is also asking if you had mentioned Central America. Do you do parts of Mexico?
Yes, we have flown both the west and east coast of Mexico, depending on the issue. We've flown Honduras, a lot in Belize. They're very poor and have a lot of environmental issues. Guatemala and Nicaragua. Those require a lot more planning than if somebody requests a flight in Montana or Wyoming, because we have to get permissions, we have to get special insurance for the airplanes, and we have to block out a few weeks for a pilot. So, but yes, we are available to do those overflights.
And again, you may have historic data, historic video or
Exactly.
stills from that.
Yeah.
And is most of your stuff GoPro for the stuff that you shoot yourself?
We shoot a lot of stills. So the stuff you'll access on the website, if you can just do a search, and it offers you to search in the photo database, and you'll get an enormous number of pictures, which you can then download in high resolution directly from the website. But if you're ever wondering if we have an image, please feel free to reach out to us. It's very easy to contact us from the website. And then the GoPro, they haven't been around for as long as cameras, and we have turned all our old historic slides into digital, so those are accessible as well. A lot more of our historical pictures, we just converted them last year, so that's been kind of fun, going back through old slides from 20 years ago.
From personal experience, I can say that the stabilization on GoPros is pretty astonishing. I don't know about other sports cameras, but I was traveling on a really, really, really bad African road for an hour and a half, and had the GoPro strapped on the front of the car, and I wanted to show this bouncing and this what the ride is actually like, and it came out smooth and just beautiful. It was really shocking.
And with the 360 GoPro, because it's two cameras, one facing back and one forward, and it knits them together, it gets rid of all the bump, which is really nice if you don't have a windy day or a bouncy day.
Unless you want to show some of the bump. So Chase is asking, he wants to clarify, and I think the difference is if you've shot the video or if you've got someone on board who's shooting, but wants to clarify whether video shot on a chartered flight would be exclusive or not, or just for a period of time. So if you're taking a journalist up and they're taking video, that's their video, right?
That's their video.
Right.
So Chase, that's yours. We don't like to use the word charter because that's a different element within the FAA, as we are nonprofit. But if you do book an environmental or educational overflight with us and you're shooting video, it is yours. If we shoot it, you still might have exclusive rights of it initially, if you want to get it on the news or something, but it remains our property. But either way, you can use it first, but obviously if you shoot it, it's yours.
Okay, over to Globy and Isabel. So someone gives us a greeting from Mumbai, interested in contributors and footage from South Asia, specifically India. And then if you can answer that, and then tell us sort of what your reach is and where predominantly your pilots exist.
Yeah, we have a lot of great pilots in the Southeast Asia area. We have pilots in India as well. So yeah, depending on what region you're looking at, or what kind of data you want, that's possible to capture. We have a lot of imagery, I think right now, from Indonesia and Philippines, but anywhere is possible. We have pilots in almost every country in Southeast Asia.
In the populated areas, and do they travel?
Yeah, of course. Not all of our pilots live in the populated areas. A lot of people actually live, in remote villages and further away from the cities. We have a very diverse network of pilots. They're either photographers themselves, part-time, full-time, or they are out and running their own drone business, doing drone inspections or mapping with their drone all day, every day. So yeah, I mean, if there's a specific country or area or interest, that's absolutely capturable.
It's just that you mentioned Indonesia, and I spent a year there, and 17,000 islands, and travel just across Java alone is an ordeal. So trying to get an idea of more specifically sort of regional distributions. So you said how many countries? The video I think said 70, but didn't you say 80 or 90 different countries?
Yeah, the video is a little bit older than our latest count. Currently, we're up to 92 countries and a little bit over 5,000 drone pilots.
Okay, and your questions, please. If you have other questions, put them in the chat, or as I think it was Chase did, feel free to jump in. And this is a conversation. We'd like feedback from all of you on how to make these services better for journalists. And Jane, I meant to ask you, by the way, when we were talking about your geographic restrictions, there are other organizations that do this. Is it Southwind? There are other organizations. So is there, and you're muted, but is there a directory of all you guys? Do you have like an affinity group or something that journalists can see geographic areas?
You know, there are not a lot of us. There's South Wings in the southeast of the United States that Bruce, I think, helped them when they originally started. And he helped a group in Southern Africa called Bataleur, which is the name of an eagle in the southern half of Africa. And they certainly provide flights down there. And then there's another organization around the United States called Lighthawk that does flights as well. So there are a number of us. And I'm not sure in Europe. We have 2 drone pilots on the staff, both Bruce and Ben Hunter, who's worked with his dad in Mongolia with the Snow Leopard Conservation Fund. So we use drones. It doesn't really fulfill our mission entirely in getting those diverse stakeholders together and really creating change from the cockpit, but it can be very useful, as Isabel would know, and I'll get them both to join you, Isabel, to get the close-up when we might not be able to. We've used heat-seeking cameras in the plane, FLIR cameras, which, as you know, with drones, you can use that on the ground for methane leaks, a lot of climate work involved with that, both in the plane and with the drone capability. So I appreciate what you guys are doing.
And someone is asking for the name of the Southern Africa group. If you could just type it in the chat,
type it in. It's
that would be great.
Yeah.
I just, to make clear, the reason why I wanted both of you on this is I don't see you as competing. I see it as very complementary. I think you both have different missions and purposes. And I think for journalists, depending what they're working on, one or the other might be most appropriate. Do you know of any groups in Canada, Jane, just offhand?
I don't.
Okay.
And sorry, my spelling self-corrected in the chat. So look at the second one, not the first one. I apologize.
Oh, there we go. Okay.
That's better. Not that I know of. You know, we've been asked to go pretty far afield in Canada, up to the tar sands, etc. And I've never heard of a group up there. But I will keep my ears open. I'll let you know if I do hear of one.
Because I'll put these in the resources too when we post this on the State of the Planet blog at Columbia. Isabel, a question about the pricing again. It's per megabyte of data. And can you give us an idea of what that would cost for someone here? So let's work through this. So do you shoot in RAW or do you shoot in JPEG?
It depends. It depends what you need. Some people prefer RAW. Some people prefer JPEG. So yeah, I mean, since most of our data today is captured on demand, it's hard to say what that would cost if you wanted it like afterwards. But I'm happy to discuss that on a case-by-case basis.
Okay, and there's another question
like
from
if you want to get in touch afterwards.
Oh, sorry. There's a question from and yeah, we'll make sure that you get put contacts in the chat at some point if you like. Someone is pointing out their photojournalist and a drone pilot, and if they join Globee, can you give them an idea of compensation? So I want to talk about that quickly in the role of the pilots themselves. So one of your missions is in a sense to sort of be a clearinghouse for people who are looking for video that can then hire local drone pilots, especially in less developed places where this is could be a very strong income stream for them, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so clients can come to us either asking for the data capture, or they ask, hey, do you have pilots in this area? We're working on a project and we need X amount of pilots, and that way collaborate. But if you are a photojournalist looking to, or you're a drone pilot, but you're looking to join Globee, it's actually totally up to you how you want to price yourself and your work. And that's based on your experience. You know, you're a freelancer, and we welcome you to put the price on your work. So yeah, depending on what needs we have to deliver data, if it's over or under the budget, then we work with the pilots on a case by case, because not every mission is the same. Some missions might require more travel. Some missions might require, you know, just a very long day of work rather than a quick, here's a 30-minute flight time. So that's really on a case by case basis, but we work with the pilots every time to determine what's your price.
And we're getting close to the hour, so just to let people know, if you have more questions, please let us know. We can go longer than that, but I just wanted to alert you to the time. You're no offense by this, but you're being a little cagey on this. Can you give us some idea of costs and pricing, just some range in the U.S.? What typically a project might be in the U.S.? I mean, if you're shooting JPEGs, you could get by with just a meg of photos. For instance, you know, what would that potentially cost in a range for people in the U.S.?
Honestly, I don't know how to answer that question, and I'll tell you why. Because every project, it really depends. It could be a project that is $50 or $5,000 or even more, because it really depends on what kind of data you're looking for. And how much planning and coordination that goes into it. But
that gives at least a starting point. We know that if it's a simple project, it could be anywhere from $50 up a little bit as an idea. Okay.
Yeah, but also keep in mind that it's also, I mean, if a journalist comes and asks for photos, that's a little bit navigating new waters for us, because most of our clients are either organizations such as the UN, who are looking for data. They're looking for a collection of information found in photos that you take over a recurring amount of time. It's a project. It's not going and snapping a photo, or you know, it's a report that's created over time with photos collected again and again and again, and analyzed and processed. So if you're asking, oh, what does it cost to have this one photo from here, or a series of photos from here, that's new waters for us, that we would love to hear, well, what do you need and what makes sense? How can we make this easier for you? Because we want to make it easy for you, but today the model is more built towards you know, long-term data collection, or, you know, having tens and thousands of photos. So yeah, I mean,
All right, so let me turn
this
this around then. Let me turn the question around and say to the journalists, we've got a bunch of journalists on this call right now. What would make sense to you? What's this is as we're seeing, this is a new process for Globee, and they haven't looked in this direction. What would make this service of value to you? Think of some sort of project that you would be working on. What would make it valuable to you to have a service like this? Even what do you think about pay scale? Anybody want to open, you know, brave the microphone, open your mic, and give us an idea? If not, I'll put Mike Kotis on the spot here. Anybody? Sorry, Mike.
Are you asking for a project idea, or
no, not a project? I don't want you to, you know, to throw out a project that you might not want people to know about right now. But if just a thought, unless you want to, it's like how would you use this service? How might you use this?
Well,
And what do you think it's worth paying?
Just basically, I think that a time progression of water level changes on Lake Mead or Lake Powell over, 20 or 30 years. That's something to kind of give you some specifics, Isabel, on what we might be able to do, what might be using that sort of fits what you described. And in terms of how much that would be, I have no idea.
Jane, that might be something that's an area you might actually have images of right now.
Yes, we do. In fact, we just flew it recently and it was the lowest ever. We flew Lake Powell and Lake Mead, and that's where a plane can help if a journalist get to both places in one flight, where a drone is going to have this super cool close-up imagery, but you might not be able to get that in one day, and a journalist could get a flight from Lake Powell to Lake Mead. So there are pluses and minuses for both. There are pros and cons for using both. And the fact that you have drone pilots all over the world is just remarkable. So obviously we're limited, but yes, we have lots of data on that, Cheryl, and you feel free to contact me or have a look on the website. We have the recent images are posted.
And I'm throwing Mike under the bus a little bit just because of your recent tar sands reporting. And I'm thinking that's an example that was someone taking drone video? Did you do that? I thought someone was taking some drone up there.
Believe it or not, and I wish that I had the bandwidth, but I'm in addition now to being a photojournalist and author, I'm also one of the editors at Inside Climate News. So I actually shot all of our aerials just off of a commercial flight that I planned so that it would go, looking at the flight paths would go over what I wanted to show. So it was, not ideal by any stretch of the imagination. But I'll point out one thing to Bethany's point, if you're looking for long time lapses of things like Lake Mead and Lake Powell, Google Earth Engine is a really amazing resource. And I don't think it's called Earth Engine anymore. I believe they've rebranded it and updated it, but we've done some really amazing long-term time lapses with that resource. Looking at, if I, kind of getting back to a question of, what it might cost if I had wanted to hire somebody to do drone photography. I should really get licensed myself. It's been on my to-do list for a long time. But if I wanted to hire somebody to do drone footage of specific tar sands mines around Fort McMurray in Alberta, Canada, you're probably looking at, a 400 square kilometer area. Not that you're flying a drone over all of that, but, it would involve a little bit of travel. And I'm just thinking what we might have invested in that, what I could actually sell to the finance folks, would say, $400 be able to get drone footage, from a place like that that's, near, a fairly large city and an airport.
If that's the request, and $400 is the budget, then yeah, we'll try and find a pilot if they're nearby and able to do that. Since pilots price themselves, we have to look at, okay, what's the budget that we're working with, and do we have available pilots in the area that agree to that?
Right.
So we're just connecting between what your needs are, and then if the need isn't met, we can either come back and say, okay, we have this pilot, but they will charge so and so, and try to bring that down so that we have a good balance of you get what you need, but not over budget. And we have a pilot who's also not, driving cross country to get to the location.
Right. And so that's really valuable for me where I'm at now, where, one of our big projects last year was on this concept of ecocide. The International Criminal Court is considering taking on ecocide as the 5th crime that it would prosecute along the lines of genocide and crimes against humanity. And we went to the sites of ecocides around the world, and usually I got to shoot one of them. Otherwise, I would, either assigned a photojournalist to go to these places, or was really scrambling to come up with imagery of these, fairly devastated locations. And at least where I'm at now, working in nonprofit media, if I can come to you with a budget and say, hey, we're doing a big thing on this part of Brazil, and the mining and deforestation that's going on there. I've got this much money that I might be able to invest in either drone footage or aerial footage. That would be something that we could kind of have a conversation about.
Absolutely. It's always easier to work out of a budget because we want to make drone data affordable, but sometimes that's not always possible because either there's nobody around, travel costs run up. But if we can work with knowing exactly what are your needs, when do you need it, do you have a budget, we'll try and figure it out.
Great. And I've got one other question, but before I ask it, I actually wanted to say, hi, Jane. I've flown with you many times over the years. So thanks a lot for doing this. But my other question for you then is kind of the other end of the scale for us, where we have much quicker turn stories. Maybe they're being, say, produced in a week to 10 days, investigative stories. How quickly can usually can you turn around something that requires a photographer or a drone photographer to be assigned, as opposed to getting with something out of your files?
That's a great question. I would say the first step is to reach out as soon as you can, and we can within a day figure out if we have someone, and if we do have someone around who's available, who's also responding within a day, we can coordinate that very quickly. If it turns out that we don't have someone, then we can try and expand and find someone. But yeah, I would say you could get an answer within a day to at least know if it's possible, and maybe wait up to a few days to see if we can sort it if it wasn't possible on the first day. So the turnaround time can be, from request to collection within a week.
Great. So that, that's really helpful for me, because I can, to be honest, I haven't reached out to a lot of places on a lot of stories, just because having been a photojournalist and a picture editor for so long, I can see that this story is going to need to run before I'm going to be able to get the imagery. But, things have changed a little bit. And, if I could turn things around in a week to 10 days on some of our, medium turn stories, I would definitely reach out on that.
Yeah.
Great, Mike, thanks. And someone mentioned this, and I this was sort of assumed on my part, and it shouldn't have been, but that the cost is also region specific, that in some areas the cost might be less than it might be in a more industrial country.
Exactly.
All right, so I think that the message that I think we're taking from this is that Jane has this incredibly established program in place now with a lot of historic data and other stuff that's accessible now, and that you guys also have some data that's usable, but also this is a process, and we're going to try and figure out how to make this work with journalists and how to make this a good opportunity for your pilots as well as for the journalists. Does that make sense? Great. All right. Well, look, before you all go, if you'd stick with me for just a second, a quick process note for journalists. A video of this webinar will be posted in the next few days at the Earth Institute blog called State of the Planet, sometime next week, probably. The address is blogs.ei.columbia.edu, or just better search Columbia and State of the Planet. You'll find it. Along with the video, I'll include a blog post, and there will be links to resources and story ideas, hopefully you can use to begin your coverage. I hope you'll check that out and also look at the other videos that make up the Resilience Media Project, and they're all aimed at journalists. Today's program was co-sponsored by the Society of Environmental Journalists. SEJ is a nonpartisan, non-advocacy educational organization dedicated to improving and increasing public understanding of complex environmental issues by improving and increasing environmental reporting. However, sponsorship of this educational program, does not constitute implied or actual endorsement by SEJ of any person, business, government, or organization, or their products, services, advertising, messages, or opinions. My apologies for giggling. SEJ is the premier organization for environmental journalists. If you're not a member, you should become one. And I mean right now. Don't wait. It's the best group out there. The Resilience Media Project is a part of Andy Revkin's initiative at the Earth Institute called Sustain What. Sustain What is a global conversation focused on identifying concrete solutions to the complicated challenges of humanity today. Our primary focus is on making sense of the changes impacting our Earth and biological systems. So my thanks to all of our guests and to all of you for joining us. And I look forward to seeing you again in the future program. Thanks everybody for being with us, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
So long.
Thank you, everyone.